Okay, so this is a walkthrough of the skeletal system revision resource, which has been set as a homework task following the first lesson of the skeletal system from anatomy and physiology. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put as much information on here as I can. That is, I can use as a revision tool or a revision resource to refer back to when it comes to exam preparation. So across the top of the page, obviously, to do this, I've just got a range of colours just to make it look nice. So across the top, I'm going to go first of all with the functions of the skeleton, which I'm going to just put across the top here. So they are protection, and these are the key words that I need to remember. Muscle attachment, joints, mineral storage, and blood cell production. When I come to exam questions, I need to be ready to talk about any of those. Sometimes you might get an exam question where it will say, other than protection, discuss another function of the skeletal system and how it's useful for sporting performance. So I'd need to be confident that I could pick all five of those, but then I could also expand on them and explain why those functions are important. So for protection, it is protection of vital organs. To expand on that further, I'd then talk about one of the examples, but I'm going to come on to that when I start labeling the bones in a moment. Muscle attachment, obviously, is useful for movement. And the key word there is tendons. Tendons are what connect muscles to bones so that when the muscles contract, they pull on the bones and create movement. A joint is where two or more bones meet. And again, joints are important for movement. Mineral storage, the main mineral that we need to be aware of is calcium. And calcium helps our bones be nice and strong. And then the last one, blood cell production. Obviously, when we look at cardiovascular system, we'll look at the function of all different blood cells. The key one being that red blood cells in the bone marrow is where they're produced, and we need those to carry oxygen. So just a little bit of information at the top of my page, just going through those five functions. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to label all of the bones of the skeletal system. To do that, I'm going to do it in 4 different colours. So I can go on to the classification of bones as well. I'll put the classification in first, actually. So the 4 classifications of bones. We have long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. And obviously each of those bones will have different functions as well. So we may get a question about why long bones are important or why flat bones are important. So I'm going to label the bones now in one of those 4 colours. So again, this is nice and easy for me to look back at. I'll start the most obvious ones, the most common ones that get used in exams, moving on to the most obscure ones towards the end. Obviously, being a PE course, most of the questions are going to be about arms and legs. So our funny bone, our humerus in the upper arm, bones in the forearm, we have radius, and we have ulna, ulna being the bone that's underneath. In the legs, we have femur, and then the lower leg, we have tibia, which is on top, and fibula. Another key long bone is your collarbone, which we're going to call clavicle. Next, I'll do the short bones, and I'll come back to there are some long bones that I've missed out. But the short bones in our hands or wrists, we have carpals, and in our ankles or feet, we have tarsals. They're the only two that we need to be aware of for this course. And then the other long bones in our hands and feet, we have metatarsals, metacarpals in the hand, and metatarsals in the feet. And then the fingers and toes are both called phalanges. Only misconception here being that they are both very small bones. They're still long bones because they're longer than they are wide, so they're still classified as long bones, albeit very, very small. Okay, flat bones next. Really easy one. One of the only ones that doesn't have a more scientific name. Ribs. Our shoulder blade. It's called our scapula. Our breastbone is called our sternum. And our skull is called cranium. Two more flat bones which are a little bit more obscure. The pelvic girdle, we have two bones. We have the ilium and the ischium. Don't think you get credit for using the word pelvis, so it's important to use the right one there. And then the last category, the irregular bones. These are the ones that don't fit into any of the categories that I've already gone through. So we have your kneecap, which is called your patella. There is a classification for that if you look at this at A level or level 3, but for this it's just irregular. You have the mandible, which is your jaw, and your maxilla. Both of those very, very, very coming up in an exam question. And then the most commonly used one, which I'm just going to put a little star next to, and put a little star here, is your vertebrae, or your vertebral column. That one is used in exams quite a lot. Function can be to protect spinal cord and some movement. Okay, it's a slightly movable joint, so it offers a little bit of movement. What we do need to know from the vertebrae is that what are the names of the 5 sections, and in the right order. So the top section is called cervical, which will be the bit, I'm just going to put C there, which is just by the neck. The top 2 vertebrae is a pivot joint also, which allows rotation for you to turn your head. The next one is the thoracic region, which is, I want to put in neck. The thoracic region have ribs attached to them, so they're the ones in the middle of your chest. The lumbar is lower back. These are slightly larger vertebrae, and they'll be accountable for holding a lot of the weight of your upper body. And then the bottom two are sacrum, which is, you can see just between the pelvic girdle there, and then your last one, coccyx, which is your tailbone. So they're all the bones I'd need to know. All I'd need to be clear with then is what the functions are of any of the bones that fit into those categories. So for the most part, long bones are used for movements. Short bones are for weight bearing. Flat can fit into two categories depending on which ones they are. So the cranium, the ribs, their job is protection. Scapula, ilium, their job is a space for muscle attachment. And then irregular bones, depending on which one it is that we're talking about, they'll all have slightly different functions. Just going to box that off. Then the only other bits that we'd cover before going on to joints next lesson would be the process of bone growth. So the process of bone growth is ossification. And that is the process of bone development from cartilage. What you may be able to add on, not covered a lot in this exam, but maybe if you were to study this at a slightly higher level, is the anatomy of a long bone. If that looks like a long bone. So these can be bones such as tibia, femur, humerus, any of those. This is where mineral storage, blood cell production is really important. The two bits that we'd need to know on here would be epiphysis. Make sure I spell that right. Which is the end of the bones, and then the main shaft in the middle is called the diaphysis. There is the periosteum around the edge of the bone, which makes it nice and hard. And then at either end of the bones, we've got this nice layer of cartilage, which once you are adults, protect the bones from rubbing together. But whilst you're younger and developing, there'll be more cartilage, and this will be where the bones will be growing. Bones will be growing longer, so they'll be growing in that direction as they will get longer and you get taller. The only thing that's missing on the sheet that I've done there would be the joints, which I could add to this once we've covered that, or I could start on a separate sheet. What I was going to cover next lesson would be what are the different synovial joints in the body and what movements do they do. But to be able to understand and access that lesson, I need to be able to locate all the bones in the body and also the 5 functions of the skeletal system.